Happy day everybody, my name is Jeremy and this is Barbecue Elementary. And today we're going to be smoking Mediterranean inspired chicken wings on my newish offset smoker with a feta dipping sauce and a gin and tonic infused with rosemary and thyme. Let's go! Earlier this week, I finally pulled the trigger on a cheap used offset smoker and I really wanted to do some sort of chicken wing to christen it. And when I asked my wife if she had any ideas, all she said was something Mediterranean. So I scoured the internet for 5 seconds and found a fun chicken wing and dip recipe I tweaked for smoking. I started by breaking into and patting dry this 5-pound pack of chicken wings and then broke them down into party wings. All you have to do is separate the drum from the flat with a sharp knife and remove the wing tips from the flat, also with, you guessed it, a sharp knife. If you are a little more patient than I am, you can work your knife around the joints with a little more finesse and avoid cutting through the bones like I did. The only real difference is that your drums will look a little better, but I'm honestly never too concerned about that. Once the wings were party ready, it was time to whip the seasonings together. I started with 2 teaspoons of baking powder, then 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, 2.5 teaspoons of dried oregano, 2.5 teaspoons of garlic powder, a half a teaspoon of dried rosemary, a quarter teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and about 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. After the dry ingredients were sorted, I added 2 tablespoons of olive oil into the bowl with the chicken, as well as 2 tablespoons-ish of fresh lemon juice and about half of a lemon's worth of zest. Then I gave the wings a quick coating toss and followed that up with the dry ingredients and gave them yet another coating toss until the tossed wings were evenly coated. Once coated, they went onto a cooking sheet for about 2 hours to soak up the seasonings in the fridge. You could let these rest overnight, but if you do, make sure to throw them into a Ziploc or an airtight container. While they waited, I also prepared the gin infusion for the cocktail. I did that by simply grabbing about 3 sprigs of thyme and 1 long little sprig of rosemary and beat it up just a little bit to open up the aromatics, and then I put about a cup of Beefeater gin into the container. This will also linger to mellow for about 2 hours up to overnight. Honestly, the longer the better. After a little more than an hour into the food and beverage self-seasoning session, it was time to start getting the new offset going. I found this barely used Oklahoma Joe's Highland on Facebook Marketplace and I'm really excited to start cooking on it. Over the next few videos, you'll probably witness a lot of trial and error as I work out all the kinks and learn what kind of modifications I'll need to make on my cooking methods or the smoker itself. That said, if y'all have any wisdom for me, leave them in the comments so I won't be left in the dark. While the charcoal was lighting up, I moved on to the feta dip. I started with 4 ounces of feta cheese, a quarter cup of Greek yogurt, a half a cup of mayo, then I microplaned 3 garlic cloves and zested a whole lemon. Then I juiced half of that lemon and added a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. Then a tablespoon of dill, 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, and a teaspoon of garlic powder. Followed by a quarter of a teaspoon of kosher salt and a quarter of a cup of freshly chopped chives. Then I gave it a good stir, making sure to mash the feta as good as I could, which was a little bit difficult. Next time I'll make sure to crumble the feta prior to adding the other ingredients. When the charcoal was lit, I went ahead and loaded it into the firebox. I had a little trouble at first as the little lever at the bottom of the chimney was stuck until I tipped it and some charcoal about landed on my feet. But we gotta move on. I decided to use some decent sized post oak splits I've had laying around, but I think for future cooks I'll need to make them a bit smaller to make fire management a little bit easier on myself. A quick pro tip, I'm going to be using these 2-gallon Home Depot buckets from now on to collect my grease. Once I was holding pretty consistently at 250 degrees, it was time for the wings to go into the smoker. The plan is to smoke these for about 2 hours at this temp and then ramp the heat up at the end for an extra crisp on the skin. During the cook, I maintained a mostly clean fire with only a few minutes of dirty smoke, and I think I held the temps pretty well, I must say, for my first cook on this thing. The only bit of maintenance I overlooked, in fact, was ash collection, but with a Traeger branded spatch and a foil pan, I was able to manage. After a few hours of steeping and only a few minutes left on the cook, I yanked out the herb infused gin and decided to make a cocktail. For this incredibly simple gin and tonic, I used 2 ounces of the infused gin, then filled the glass with ice, and then added 4 ounces of tonic water. And lastly, I garnished with a lemon wheel and a sprig of rosemary. Like I said, this is a very easy cocktail to make, but it should be perfect to pair with these wings and dipping sauce. Cheers. After 2 hours of cooking at 250, it was time to crisp up the skin. So for the last 20 minutes of the cook, I ramped up the heat to 325 degrees. Once the wings were temping around 170 degrees and the color was looking really nice, they were ready to pull. For my first time on this smoker, I was pretty impressed with the cook. Next time I'll try to limit the dirty smoke by using smaller splits, but other than that, I'm excited to keep cooking on it. And the chicken was looking really good and the skin seemed pretty crispy. It was time to give them a try. First of all, these were cooked really well. They were super juicy, the meat had good texture, but I was hoping for the skin to be a little crispier, which means I probably should have gone a little hotter during the last phase of the cook. As for the taste with the wing alone, I was a little disappointed. The fattiness and smokiness was nice, but the seasoning was definitely lacking. I'm not sure if it was the salt amount or if I should have let them sit longer, but I just wasn't impressed. I will say that they really came alive in the dipping sauce. It was tangy, savory, and creamy and was the only reason I couldn't stop eating these things. Well, maybe not the only reason, because the cocktail was a really good pairing. The herbal notes in the infused gin played well with the subtle flavors of the wings and cut into the creaminess of the dip. For grades this week, I'd give the chicken by itself a D-, I'd give the chicken with the dipping sauce a C-, and I'd give the cocktail a B-, which gets an overall grade of a C-. And as always, thanks a million for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't to follow me along on my adventures through Barbecue Elementary.